Here's the thing about watching your species lose the same war for the 400th time. You start to recognize the smell of your own ashes. The Veth Collective had calculated every possible outcome across 17,000 simulated timelines. In 16,999 of them, humanity fell. The one remaining timeline didn't involve victory. It involved a draw so narrow that both sides bled out together. The Veth called this the statistical corpse conclusion. They presented it to Earth's United Nations with the kind of polite condescension reserved for explaining arithmetic to a toddler. What the Veth couldn't understand because their mathematics had no category for it, was that humans had already lost this war before. Not in simulations. In memory. In bone. In the kind of genetic scar tissue that gets passed down through generations like a curse and a gift all twisted together. We didn't need their simulations. We've been living in the corpse conclusion for 3,000 years. The first thing you need to understand about the Veth Collective is that they are not cruel. This is important. Cruelty requires imagination, and the Veth have exactly as much imagination as a spreadsheet. They are reasonable. They are logical. They are, in every measurable way, superior to humans. Faster cognitive processing, more efficient biological systems, a hive-adjacent consciousness that eliminates petty disagreements and personal vendettas. They looked at humanity the way an engineer looks at a broken machine. Not with malice, with pity, with the quiet certainty that replacement parts are the only solution. Ambassador Lian Zhao had been dealing with the Veth for 11 years, which meant she had aged approximately 30 years in human terms. The Veth did not negotiate. The Veth calculated. Every diplomatic meeting was just a presentation of data, followed by a request for compliance, followed by a 3-minute pause while the Veth ambassador, a towering, insectal creature named Veth Mailer, who spoke through a translator that smelled faintly of burnt sugar, waited for the inevitable human surrender. The collective has reviewed the projections for the Tau-Seti conflict, Veth Mailer said, its mandibles clicking in a rhythm that Lian had learned to interpret as mild impatience. Your species has a 0.0004% chance of survival if you continue to resist our administrative oversight. The statistical margin of error is negligible. Lian looked down at her hands. They were shaking slightly. Not from fear. She'd stopped being afraid of the Veth around year 3. The shaking was exhaustion. Pure, bone-deep exhaustion from fighting a war that existed almost entirely in spreadsheets and probability matrices. You've shown us these projections before, she said. 17,406 times, Veth Mailer confirmed. Your species continues to reject mathematically inevitable conclusions. This is puzzling. There was the Veth's great weakness, hiding in plain sight. They didn't understand puzzles. They didn't understand why a species would look at a 99.996% chance of death and say no anyway. They had no evolutionary history of staring into the abyss and spitting into it. Their ancestors had evolved on a world without predators, without scarcity, without the kind of brutal natural selection that turns every surviving creature into a small, furious engine of refusal. Lian's ancestors had evolved on the savannas of East Africa, where being slower than the lion meant becoming the lion's lunch. They had survived ice ages and plagues and world wars and nuclear close calls. They had crawled out of extinction events so many times that extinction had become a kind of familiar, a neighbor who visited every few centuries, stayed too long, and was eventually shown the door. The Veth didn't know this. Couldn't know it. Their mathematics had no variable for fuck you. Try again. The council has authorized me to present a new proposal, Veth Mailer continued. The collective will accept the relocation of your species to designated preserves on 17 Class M worlds. Your culture will be maintained. Your genetic diversity will be protected. You will be studied but not harmed. Lian felt something cold move through her chest. Preserves. Protected habitats. Your species would be safe from external threats. You would no longer need to participate in conflicts beyond your cognitive capacity. Like a zoo. Veth Mailer tilted its head. A gesture it had picked up from humans, probably without understanding that it was sarcastic. If that analogy helps you process the proposal, then yes. Like a zoo, Lien stood up. Her chair scraped against the floor, and the sound was loud in the sterile conference room. She walked to the window. Outside, the Veth administrative hub floated above what used to be the Pacific Ocean. The water was clear now. The Veth had cleaned it, which was nice of them. They'd also dismantled every coastal city to build their orbital tether stations. But you couldn't have everything. You know what I find interesting about your simulations? She said, not turning around. They are accurate to 99.9997%. Veth Mailer replied. No, maybe. I'm not a mathematician. What I find interesting is that you've run 17,000 timelines, and in every single one, we lose. But you're still here, still talking to us, still offering preserves. Silence. The burnt sugar smell intensified. Veth Mailer's translator working overtime. Your conclusion, the ambassador said carefully, is incorrect. The collective continues diplomatic engagement because our ethical framework requires exhausting all nonviolent options before implementing administrative consolidation. Lien turned, smiled. It was not a nice smile. Or, she said, you've run the simulations where you try to kill us all, and you lose. The translator clicked 3 times, the Veth equivalent of sharp inhale. That is not. You came here in ships. Weapons. You've been preparing for this moment for decades. You have the firepower to glass every planet in the solar system. But you haven't used it. Why? Veth Mailer's mandibles went still. For the first time in 11 years, Lien saw something in its posture that might have been uncertainty. The simulations are complex, it said finally. Your species displays anomalous behavior patterns during extinction-level events. Patterns that our models cannot fully account for. Anomalous behavior patterns, Lien repeated. You mean we fight back? We mean you fight differently. Individual humans have demonstrated tactical creativity that exceeds our predictive capabilities. Your species has a tendency toward self-sacrifice, altruistic violence, actions that reduce individual survival probability while increasing group survival probability. Our models struggle with this. Because you're not built for it. Because it is illogical. Lien laughed. It came out sounding a little broken a little while because she'd been holding this inside for 11 years, and it was finally spilling out. Let me tell you a story, Ambassador. About 3,000 years ago, humans almost wiped ourselves out. Nuclear war. Environmental collapse. The whole package. We spent 500 years climbing back from the edge, and I mean the edge, like one more bad harvest, and that's its species over. Do you know what we learned? Veth Mailer waited. We learned that survival isn't about being the strongest, or the smartest, or the most logical. It's about being the one who refuses to stay dead. You can kill us. You can burn our cities and crack our planets and hunt us through the stars. But we'll keep coming back. Not because we're brave. Not because we're noble. Because we're stubborn and we have nowhere else to go, and we already lost this war once before. She walked back to the table and placed both hands flat on its surface. The Veth Collective has been running simulations for 300 years. You've predicted our defeat in every timeline. But here's the thing about timelines, Ambassador, you only get to run the ones where humans follow the rules. And we don't. We never have. Every simulation that says we lose is a simulation where we behave rationally, where we surrender when the numbers say surrender, where we retreat when retreat makes sense. She leaned forward. What happens in the simulation where we just don't? Veth Mailer's translator emitted a low hum. That scenario is outside our parameters. Exactly. The door opened. A human aide, young, scared, trying not to show it, stepped inside and handed Lien a data slate. She glanced at it, read it twice, felt something hot and fierce bloom behind her ribs. The Odysseus just launched, she said quietly. Veth Mailer's mandibles spread wide, a gesture of alarm. The Odysseus is an interstellar arc. Your species' final contingency. Its launch indicates a civilization-ending event. Or, Lien said, it indicates that we're done waiting for you to make up your mind. She turned the data slate around so the ambassador could see the schematics. The Odysseus wasn't an ark. It was a weapon. 3 kilometers of reinforced hull, powered by a black hole engine, carrying enough antimatter to turn a gas giant into a second sun. Humanity's final fuck you. We're not going to the preserves, Lien said. We're going to your homeworld. And if you try to stop us, we'll show you what anomalous behavior patterns actually look like. The Veth Collective had a problem. The problem was not the Odysseus. The ship was impressive by human standards, a monstrosity of welded salvage and desperate engineering, but the Veth had destroyed larger vessels with casual efficiency. No, the problem was what the Odysseus represented, what it meant, what it suggested about human psychology that the Veth's mathematical models had completely missed. Because the Odysseus wasn't supposed to exist. According to every simulation, every projection, every cold calculation of resource allocation and survival probability, humanity should have used their remaining industrial capacity to build defensive fortifications. Orbital platforms, planetary shields, anything that would extend the war another decade, another century, another desperate gasp before the inevitable end. Instead, they'd build a battering ram. And they were aiming it directly at the heart of the collective. Their trajectory is confirmed, Veth Processor said during the emergency council. The collective's leadership existed as distributed consciousness across 17 biological bodies, all floating in nutrient baths beneath the capital spire. They communicated through direct neural links, which meant their debates were instantaneous and brutally efficient. The Odysseus will reach our primary system in 14 standard cycles. Its weapon systems are sufficient to cause catastrophic damage to our homeworld. Can it be intercepted? Veth Calculator asked. 87% probability of successful interception before it enters firing range. And the human response to interception? Silence. The neural links flickered with uncertainty. Our models show 3 possible outcomes, Veth Processor said. In the first, the human vessel surrenders after demonstrating its inability to penetrate our defenses. Probability for percent. Too low. In the second, the human vessel is destroyed, and the remaining human population on Earth surrenders within 1 standard cycle. Probability 11%. And the third, Veth Processor's neural signature flickered, the equivalent of psi. In the third, the destruction of the Odysseus triggers a pre-programmed response. 37 other human vessels, currently hidden throughout the outer system, launch simultaneous attacks on collective holdings. The human population on Earth initiates a planetary-scale self-destruct sequence. The war becomes asymmetrical. Asymmetrical how? The humans have seeded their population throughout our administrative zones. Millions of individuals working as laborers, technicians, diplomatic staff. If the war becomes total, these individuals will become combatants. Our models cannot predict the outcome of such a conflict because we have no data on how a species behaves when every surviving member becomes a suicide bomber. The council went very still. This is not rational, Veth Calculator said. A species that destroys itself cannot win. Correct. So why would humans choose this outcome? Because Veth Processor said they have already lost. Every simulation says they will lose. Every rational calculation says they will lose. Therefore, the only logical choice is to ensure that their loss is so costly that the winner is destroyed as well. That is not a victory condition. No, but it is a human condition. On the bridge of the Odysseus, Captain Elena Vasquez watched the starfield and thought about her grandmother. Her grandmother had survived the fall. The real fall, not the polite Veth version where administrative consolidation meant the systematic dismantling of human civilization. No, her grandmother had survived the first fall, the one humans did to themselves, back in the 21st century when climate collapse and resource wars had reduced the global population to less than 1 billion scattered survivors. Her grandmother had been 12 years old when the bombs fell. had watched her entire city burn from a hillside, clutching a stuffed rabbit and her younger brother's hand, had walked 300 miles through radioactive ash to reach a settlement that didn't exist anymore by the time she got there. And her grandmother had survived, had thrived even, had built a farm, raised a family, told stories about the old world that made Elena's mother roll her eyes and say, "Here we go again." But Elena had listened. She'd listened to every story, every detail, every scrap of wisdom her grandmother had dragged out of the apocalypse. And the one thing her grandmother had said over and over was this: the world doesn't end because you want it to. It ends because you let it. And we didn't let it. We never let it. Every single day, someone woke up and decided to keep going, and that's the only reason you're sitting here right now. Elena looked around the bridge. Her crew was terrified. She could see in their hands, trembling over controls, white-knuckled on armrests. Could smell in the recycled air that sharp, metallic tang of cortisol and adrenaline. But they were here. Every single one of them had volunteered, had signed up for a one-way trip into the heart of enemy territory, knowing that the survival probability was somewhere between 0 and a rounding error. Had left behind families, lovers, unfinished business, all the ordinary human attachments that made life worth living. They were here because something in them had refused to stay home, had refused to wait for the end, had looked at 99.996% chance of death and said, "Yeah, but what about the other 0.004%? Status report, Elena said. Shields at 63%, her tactical officer said. We're picking up VEF interceptor vessels on long-range scan. ETA to engagement. 8 hours. Navigation. We're holding course. The black hole engine is stable. Mostly. Engineering says we've got about 48 hours before the containment field starts to degrade. 48 hours. Enough time to reach the VEF homeworld. Enough time to deliver the payload. Enough time to win a war that every computer in the galaxy said was impossible. Communications? A pause. Her communications officer, a kid named Marcus, barely 22, with acne scars and a voice that cracked when he got nervous, turned to face her. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from VEF Command. It's not what we expected. Put it through." The main view screen flickered. Instead of the usual VEF mailer, with its clicking mandibles and burnt sugar translator, a new figure appeared. Smaller, softer, almost human in its proportions, though the pale blue skin and extra set of eyes gave it away. "I'm VEF Whisper," the creature said. Its voice was quiet, almost gentle. "I'm a collective's specialist in anomalous psychology." Elena raised an eyebrow. "They have a specialist in us. They have many specialists. You are very confusing." VEF Whisper's lower eyes blinked independently of its upper eyes, a disconcerting effect. "I am here to propose an alternative to mutual destruction." "There's no alternative. You want to put us in preserves. We want to not be in preserves. Those positions are mutually exclusive." "Are they?" Elena whited. "Your ship," VEF Whisper continued, "represents a significant investment of resources. Resources that could have been used for defense, for survival, for prolonging your species' existence. Instead, you chose to build a weapon that can only be used once. This is fascinating. Our models have no explanation for this decision." "It's not complicated," Elena said. "We're not going to win a defensive war. You have better technology, better logistics, better coordination. Every day we hide behind our shields is another day you grind us down. So we decided to change the game by attacking our homeworld, by making you understand that winning isn't free." VEF Whisper's 4 eyes studied her. There was something in that gaze, not hostility exactly, curiosity, the kind of intense, almost uncomfortable attention that Elena had only ever experienced from cats and small children. "Your grandmother," VEF Whisper said suddenly. Elena's heart stuttered. "What?" "Captain Vasquez, your maternal grandmother. She survived the nuclear conflicts of your 21st century. She walked 300 miles through irradiated territory. She carried her brother until her arms gave out, and then She dragged him. She arrived at a settlement that no longer existed, so she built a new one. She was 12 years old. How do you know this? Our intelligence gathering is thorough. We wanted to understand what makes your species resilient. Your grandmother's story was particularly instructive. Elena felt her hands curl into fists. She's been dead for 40 years. Yes, but her legacy lives in you, in your crew, in every human who chose to board this ship instead of waiting for the end. Veth Whisper tilted its head. That same gesture Veth Mailer had used, the one that humans had taught them without meaning to. Here is my proposal, Captain. Turn your ship around. Return to Earth. And we will negotiate a new arrangement, one that does not involve preserves. Why would you offer that now? Because you have shown us something our simulations could not account for. You have shown us that your species will choose mutual destruction over surrender. This is not a rational choice, but it is a real choice, and it changes the mathematics. Elena stared at the view screen, at the alien creature with 4 eyes and a quiet voice and an offer that sounded too good to be true. What's the catch? The catch, Veth Whisper said, is that we do not understand you. We cannot predict you. This makes you dangerous in ways our models cannot quantify. And the collective has decided that unquantifiable danger is unacceptable. So you're scared of us. We are cautious. There's a difference. No, Elena said, and she smiled, that same broken, wild smile that Lien Zhao had worn in the conference room. There really isn't. The Odysseus did not turn around. Elena considered Veth Whisper's proposal for approximately 3 seconds. Then, she opened a ship-wide channel and said, "We're continuing to destination. All hands, prepare for engagement." Her crew cheered. Not because they wanted to die. Not because they were suicidal or fanatical or too stupid to understand the odds. They cheered because they had spent 300 years losing a war they hadn't started against an enemy that treated them like defective equipment, and someone had finally given them permission to hit back. The Veth Interceptor fleet arrived in 6 hours, not 8. 53 vessels, each one larger than the Odysseus, each one bristling with weapons that could turn a planet's surface to glass. They formed a hemisphere around the human ship. Not quite a sphere, because the Veth had learned that human tactics often involved exploiting geometric blind spots. They'd learned that lesson the hard way during the Battle of Mars, when a single human destroyer had slipped through a gap in their formation and taken out 3 capital ships before being vaporized. The Veth learned quickly. That was one of their strengths. But humans learned adaptively. There was a difference. Multiple incoming signals, Marcus said. They're hailing us on all frequencies. Let them hail. Captain, I said let them hail. I want them to wonder why we're not responding. I want them to run every scenario through their perfect little brains and come up with nothing. I want them to be afraid. The bridge fell silent. Outside, the Veth fleet waited. Elena counted to 60 in her head. Then, she said, "Marcus, open a channel." Narrow beam focused on their flagship. Channel open. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the Earth vessel Odysseus. We are on a direct course for your homeworld. We are carrying enough antimatter to turn your sun into a second star. We will not stop. We will not surrender. We will not negotiate. If you fire on us, we will detonate our payload and take this entire system with us. You have 60 seconds to clear a path." She cut the channel. The Veth fleet held position for 43 seconds. Then, slowly, the hemisphere parted. 53 vessels drifted apart, creating a corridor wide enough for the Odysseus to pass through. "Confirmed," Marcus whispered. "They're letting us through." "Of course they are," Elena said. They ran the numbers. They know that destroying us means destroying themselves. And they're not built for that. They're not built to die. The Veth Collective had never lost a war. This was not arrogance. It was statistical fact. In their 3-million-year history, they had encountered dozens of intelligent species. Some had been friendly. Some had been hostile. Some had been so alien that communication was impossible. But every single conflict had ended the same way. The Veth calculated the most efficient path to victory, implemented it with flawless precision, and accepted the surrender of their defeated enemies. They had never encountered a species that refused to surrender. They had certainly never encountered a species that weaponized its own destruction. Veth Whisper watched the Odysseus approach through the fleet's sensor feed. The human ship was ugly, all sharp angles and welded plates like something assembled from scrap in a hurry, which Veth Whisper realized it probably had been. Humans didn't build for elegance. They built for function, for purpose. And the purpose of this ship was very clear. Their captain, Veth Processor, said through the neural link, "She is not bluffing." "No," Veth Whisper agreed. "She is not." "Then what do we do?" "Our homeworld is 72 standard hours from her firing range. Our fleet cannot stop her without triggering mutual destruction. Our diplomatic overtures have been rejected. We do something we have never done before," Veth Whisper said. "We admit that we do not know the outcome." The council stirred. Neural links flickered with something that might have been discomfort. "Your specialization is anomalous psychology," Veth Calculator said. "What does your expertise suggest?" Veth Whisper considered the question. It had spent 300 years studying humans, reading their history, analyzing their art, watching their behavior through every available lens. It had compiled more data on human psychology than any other Veth in existence. And despite all that data, despite all those years, it still did not understand them. Not really, but it had learned one thing, one crucial thing. Humans do not value survival above all else, Veth Whisper said. They value meaning. They will die for their children, for their ideals, for a flag, a memory, a promise made to a dead grandmother. They will sacrifice everything for something that exists only in their minds. That is irrational. Yes, it is also the source of their strength. They will endure suffering that would destroy any other species because they believe the suffering has purpose. And when they believe that, they become unstoppable. The council was silent. The Odysseus is not a weapon, Veth Whisper continued. It is a statement. A declaration that humans would rather die fighting than live in cages. If we destroy it, we prove them right. If we let it pass, we prove them right. Either way, they win, not because they defeat us militarily, but because they force us to become the kind of species that accepts their terms. Then what do you suggest? Veth Whisper's 4 eyes blinked slowly. I suggest we learn something. On the bridge of the Odysseus, Elena received a second transmission from Veth Whisper. Captain Vasquez, I would like to request permission to come aboard your vessel. Elena stared at the view screen. You want to board the ship that's carrying enough explosives to destroy your civilization? I want to understand you. Our sensors cannot provide the data I need. I require direct observation, personal interaction. I am willing to come alone, unarmed, and submit to whatever security protocols you require. Why? Because your species has won. Not this battle. The war is not yet concluded. But the principle. You have demonstrated that your values are not inferior to ours, merely different. The collective has spent 300 years trying to fit humans into our models. Perhaps it is time we accepted that the models are wrong. Elena looked around the bridge. Her crew was watching her, waiting for her decision. She could see the exhaustion in their faces, the fear, the hope, all mixed together into something raw and human and beautiful. Send a shuttle, she said. We'll meet you in the hangar bay. Veth Whisper's shuttle was small and sleek, a teardrop of polished metal that seemed to float rather than fly. It docked without sound, without vibration, without any of the clunky mechanical drama that human ships produced. The Veth were elegant, even when they were surrendering. Elena waited in the hangar bay with a security team of 4. She told them to keep their weapons holstered, but ready. She didn't expect violence. The Veth didn't operate that way. But she learned never to underestimate an enemy's capacity for surprise. The shuttle's hatch opened. A ramp extended. No, not a ramp. A bridge. Delicate, almost fragile-looking, made of something that shimmered in the hangar lights. Veth Whisper walked down the bridge. It was smaller than Elena had expected, about the size of a human child. though its proportions were completely different. For legs, for arms, for eyes arranged in a diamond pattern across its face. Its skin was the color of a twilight sky, deep blue shot through with veins of silver. It moved with a liquid grace that made Elena think of water flowing over stones. "Captain Vasquez," Veth Whisper said. Its voice was quiet, almost musical. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting." "You're welcome. Why are you here?" Veth Whisper's 4 eyes studied her, each one moving independently, tracking different parts of her face, her posture, her hands. "I am here to learn. Your species has forced the collective to reconsider its assumptions. We would like to understand why. Understanding won't change the outcome. We're still on course for your homeworld. We're still carrying enough explosives to end your civilization. I know, but perhaps if we understand each other, we can find a different outcome. One that does not involve mutual destruction." Elena crossed her arms. "You're asking me to trust you." "No, I'm asking you to talk to me. Trust can come later, or not at all. But communication is possible without trust. Your own history demonstrates this. Enemies have negotiated throughout your species' existence." "That's true," Elena admitted. "But they usually negotiate from positions of roughly equal power. Right now, you have 53 warships surrounding us, and enough firepower to turn this ship into confetti. We have a bomb and a death wish. That's not equal." "No," Veth Whisper said. "It is not. But you misunderstand the nature of power, Captain. Your species has something we do not. Something we cannot simulate, cannot predict, cannot defend against." "What's that?" Veth Whisper's mandibles, smaller than Veth Mailer's, almost delicate, clicked softly. "You have nothing to lose." The words hung in the air between them. Elena thought about her grandmother, about the 300-mile walk through radioactive ash, about the stuffed rabbit and the younger brother and this settlement that didn't exist anymore. She thought about her own childhood, growing up in the shadow of the Veth occupation, learning to hide her hopes the way her grandmother had learned to hide from patrol drones. She thought about the first time she'd seen a starship, not as a symbol of wonder, but as a threat. A Veth cruiser, hanging in the sky like a sword, reminding everyone below that they were not in charge of their own destiny. She thought about the day she'd decided to join the resistance. The day she'd looked at her grandmother's grave and said, "I'm going to finish what you started." "You're right," she said finally. "We have nothing to lose. But that's not because we're desperate. It's because we already lost everything. Once, twice, 100 times. Every generation, we rebuild. Every generation, we lose again. And every generation, we get back up. That is not sustainable. No, it's not. But it's real. It's what we are. And you can't negotiate with that, can't simulate it, can't defeat it. Because every time you knock us down, we learn something. Every time you take something from us, we find a way to live without it. Every time you think you've won, you look up and we're still there, still fighting, still refusing." Veth Whisper was very still. "You are describing a pathology," it said quietly. "A species that cannot accept defeat cannot survive. Evolution favors adaptation, not stubbornness. Evolution also favors cooperation," Elena said. "Symbiosis. Species that learn to work together outlast species that compete. You've been trying to absorb us into your collective, but you've been doing it wrong. You've been treating us like a problem to be solved instead of a partner to be understood. And you would prefer partnership? I would prefer not to die. But I'll take partnership over preserves." Veth Whisper's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture Elena couldn't interpret. "The collective will need time to consider this. Our decision-making processes are thorough. We don't have time. We're 72 hours from your homeworld. My engineering team says the black hole engine will fail in 48. If we don't have an answer by then, we detonate. That is not a negotiation." "No," Elena said. "It's a deadline." Welcome to human diplomacy. The next 36 hours were the longest of Elena's life. Veth Whisper remained aboard the Odysseus, moving through the ship with quiet curiosity. It asked questions, endless questions about everything. Why did humans sleep in separate rooms? Why did they cook their food? Why did they decorate their walls with images of places they'd never been? Why did they name their ships after mythological figures? Why did they tell stories about heroes who lost? Elena's crew answered as best they could. Some of the questions were easy. Some were impossible. Some made them laugh, or cry, or stare into the middle distance while they tried to articulate something they'd never had to put into words before. The Odysseus, Veth Whisper said at one point, standing in front of the ship's dedication plaque. In your mythology, Odysseus was a wanderer, a trickster, a man who survived impossible odds through cunning rather than strength. That's right. Your ship is not cunning. It is a battering ram. There is no trick here, no deception. You are sailing directly toward our homeworld with no attempt at stealth or misdirection. Elena shrugged. Sometimes the best trick is not having a trick. I do not understand. Odysseus spent 10 years trying to get home. He lied, cheated, manipulated, disguised himself, did everything he could think of to survive. But, in the end, what got him home wasn't cunning. It was stubbornness. He just refused to give up. For 10 years. Through monsters and gods and everything the universe could throw at him. He just kept going. Veth Whisper's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. That is not a strategy. No, it's a character trait. And it's the only one that's ever worked for us. At hour 40, the Veth Collective made its decision. Veth Whisper received the transmission silently. Elena couldn't even tell it was communicating because the Veth's neural links were invisible to human senses. But she saw the change in its posture, the slight relaxation of its limbs, the way its 4 eyes seemed to soften just a little. The collective has agreed to your terms, Veth Whisper said. Humanity will not be relocated to preserves. Your species will be granted autonomous governance within the collective's administrative framework. You will have representation in our councils. Your culture will be protected. Elena waited. There had to be a catch. In exchange, Veth Whisper continued, you will disarm the Odysseus. Your species will not develop weapons of mutual destruction. You will share your unique perspectives with the collective so that we may better understand species that do not fit our models. That's it. That is the beginning. The details will take years to negotiate. There will be disagreements, conflicts, moments when both sides consider abandoning the arrangement. But the foundation has been laid. Elena looked at her crew. They were watching her, all of them, from the bridge officers to the engineers to the kid Marcus, who was crying openly and not bothering to hide it. Turn us around, she said quietly. Set a course for home. The bridge erupted. The Odysseus arrived back at Earth 3 weeks later. The Veth fleet escorted it the entire way, not as captors but as guardians. 53 warships, once poised to destroy humanity, now forming a protective cordon around the battered human vessel. The symbolism was not lost on anyone. Lian Zhao was waiting at the docking bay. She looked older than Elena remembered, thinner, grayer, with deep lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. But she was smiling. A real smile, not the tight, controlled expression she'd worn during 11 years of diplomatic torture. You did it, Lian said as Elena stepped off the ramp. We did it, Elena corrected. I just flew the ship. You're the one who spent 11 years convincing them we were worth talking to. I spent 11 years losing. You spent 3 weeks winning. That's not how it works. You laid the groundwork. You made them ask questions. You made them curious. I just finished the sentence. Lian laughed, a sound that cracked in the middle because she'd almost forgotten how. Your grandmother would be proud. Elena felt her throat tighten. She's the one who taught me. Not with words, well, with words too, but mostly with, I don't know, with her life. With the way she just kept going, no matter what. She walked 300 miles through hell. She did. And then she built a farm. And then she raised a family. And then she told stories. And then she died, surrounded by people who loved her, having never once surrendered to anything. Lian put a hand on Elena's shoulder. That's the thing the Veth never understood, she said. They kept looking for our strength in our weapons, our technology, our military tactics. But it was never there. It was always in the small things. The daily refusals. The ordinary stubbornness of getting out of bed when you'd rather not. The decision to keep going, keep hoping, keep trying, even when every simulation said you'd fail. They understand now. Do they? Elena thought about Veth Whisper, about its endless questions, its quiet curiosity, its willingness to admit that its models were wrong. I think they're starting to, she said. I think that's the best we can ask for. Epilogue. 3 years later, the Veth Collective's council chamber had been redesigned. Not physically, the nutrient baths and neural links remained because the Veth couldn't change their biology any more than humans could change theirs. But the process had changed. New voices had been added to the council. Human voices. Speaking not as supplicants or subjects, but as equals. Lian Zhao sat in her nutrient bath. She'd learned to tolerate it, though she still missed chairs, and listened to Veth Whisper present its latest research. The human concept of hope remains difficult to quantify, the small blue creature said. It appears to be a belief in positive outcomes that are not supported by available evidence. This is, by definition, irrational. And yet, human societies that maintain higher levels of hope consistently outperform those that do not, even when controlling for all other variables. Hope, Veth calculators said, is a cognitive bias. Perhaps. But it is a cognitive bias that produces real results. Human soldiers who believe they will survive fight harder. Human scientists who believe they will discover something new work longer. Human parents who believe their children will have better lives make greater sacrifices. The belief itself creates the conditions for the outcome. Lian spoke up. You're still trying to fit us into your models. Veth Whisper's 4 eyes turned toward her. We are trying to understand you. The models are tools, not prisons. The distinction matters. It does. We have learned that. Lian leaned back in her bath. It was almost comfortable now, and thought about the journey that had brought her here. The 11 years of frustration. The single moment of breakthrough. The strange, unlikely partnership that had emerged from the ashes of a war that should never have been fought. The Veth have a word for what humans did, Veth Whisper said quietly. It is Kthal. It means the moment when a system recognizes that its operating assumptions are wrong and chooses to change rather than fail. What do humans call it? Lian smiled. We call it Tuesday. The human delegation left the council chamber and walked through the Veth administrative hub. Outside, through the transparent walls, they could see Earth hanging in the distance, blue and green and alive, scarred but unbroken, stubborn as always. 300 years, Lian said. 300 years of losing, and we finally won. Did we? Elena asked. She'd come along as military attaché, though her real job was reminding the Veth what human stubbornness looked like. It doesn't feel like winning. It feels like surviving. Same as always. Maybe that's what winning is for us. Elena thought about her grandmother, about the 300-mile walk, about the farm, the family, the stories, about the quiet, ordinary miracle of getting up every morning and choosing to keep going. Maybe, she said. They walked in silence for a while. The Veth around them went about their business, efficient, logical, still not quite understanding the strange species that had joined their collective. But something had changed. Something had shifted. The Veth looked at humans differently now. Not with pity, not with condescension, but with something that might have been respect, or curiosity, or the beginning of something neither species had a word for. It's not over, Lian said finally. The war, I mean. There will be other conflicts, other disagreements, other moments when the Veth try to put us in boxes we don't fit. I know. Are you ready for that? Elena stopped walking. She looked out at the stars, the same stars her grandmother had seen, the same stars every human had seen since the beginning, the same stars that had witnessed every triumph and every failure and every stubborn refusal to stay dead. We're humans, she said. We've been ready for 3,000 years. She smiled, that broken, wild, impossible smile. Bring it on. In the end, the Veth Collective learned something no simulation could have taught them. They learned that strength is not the same as power. That victory is not the same as survival. That the species most likely to endure is not the strongest or the smartest or the most efficient, but the one that simply refuses to stop. They learned what humans had always known. You can lose every battle. You can lose every war. You can lose everything except the decision to keep going. And that decision made over and over by billions of ordinary people who never asked to be heroes. That decision changes everything. The war lost in every timeline, except the one where humans refused to abandon it. That timeline became reality. Because humans don't need probability. They need purpose. And they will burn the universe to the ground before they surrender either.